Think marketing research is too expensive? We're exploring three easy and cost effective ways you can start conducting audience research on this episode of Closing Time. Thanks for tuning into Closing Time, the show for go-to-market leaders. I'm Chip House, CMO at Insightly CRM, and I'm joined by Rand Fishkin, CEO of SparkToro, an audience research platform. He's also the former CEO and co-founder of Moz, which maybe is how you know him. And he's also the author of the book Lost and Founder. Welcome to the show, Rand.
Yeah, great to be here, Chip. Thanks for having me.
I'm super excited to dig into this topic, and I know you know a thing or two about it. And I'm excited for our viewers, frankly, because I know you have the reputation as the guy who uses whiteboards and offers, very actionable feedback. And so I don't know if we're going to see the whiteboard today or not, Rand, but nonetheless, excited to talk about audience research. So, when I think a lot of marketers hear the term, hey, I want to do audience or market research, they think a couple of things. They think that's hard. I don't know anything about it. And they also might think it's really expensive. So what do you say to that?
It can be really expensive if you would like to blow a lot of money on it. There are lots of companies who would be happy to take that money from you. Survey design firms, your McKinsey's and such. However, market research and audience research, which are sort of two different things, but have lots of overlap in terms of how you might do them tactically, it does not have to be expensive. So when we started SparkToro, which is almost 5 years ago now, the first year and a half was literally all market research, audience research. And essentially, the way we did that was how I recommend almost everyone does it. And that is a combination of three things: surveys, interviews, and passively collected data at scale, which you can do that in a variety of ways. And we can go deeper on that. But a survey can be free, right? Like a Google form survey, totally free. You can sign up for the free version of, SurveyMonkey or Typeform. I actually like Typeform a lot. It's very inexpensive, and I get very high response rates there. So I do a lot of my public surveys through Typeform. Essentially, what we did is we just promoted that Typeform, research survey on our social channels and through, my personal network and people I had known. And I reached out to people and asked them to amplify it. And when I went to events, I asked people at those events to take it. This is that's the sort of startup mentality market research, and it can be shockingly effective. It told us who our customers were, demographically who they were, psychographically, geographically. It told us what they cared about and didn't care about, right? So we were specifically interested in the problem of at the time what I was calling influence marketing. Not influencers, but sources of influence marketing. And so I was trying to figure out how did people discover this? How did they solve this problem? What were they doing today? What tools did they use? What processes? Did they ignore the channel entirely? And we learned a tremendous amount. And I think it helped us be very successful with the initial launch of the product, which was informed by both those surveys at the high level and then a lot of interviews at the detail level, right? So I just call up folks, a lot of folks like yourself, actually, Chip. Mm-hmm. Right? I'd be like, oh, CMO at a SaaS company, fantastic, right? Chip, hey, walk me through your process for this. How do you make these kinds of investments? Do you make these kinds of investments? Have you ever done them? Why don't you? What would make you all that kind of stuff? And you get phenomenal data from this that is incredibly actionable, right? It helps you tune into what product should I build? What features should I build? How should I talk about it, right? If you're a marketer, a ton of your problem is, what message should I tell in which places to reach my audience and get them to pay attention to me and convert to, a future buyer? And this information is priceless for that. So yeah. Anyway, that's the starting point. It doesn't have to be pricey.
Yeah, and I guess I've used Typeform and SurveyMonkey and Get Feedback, and there's a number of great platforms now, and they're all mobile friendly now too, right? With great output, and so it's a great place to start for sure. So you mentioned something there, and I think that you're a bit more evolved than honestly I think a lot of marketers are relative to the language to even use to think about conducting research. And, when we had a chat before, you talked about there is a difference between your potential and your current customers versus who your audience is. Do you want to break that down for us? I think it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a big part of the difference between market research and audience research as well, right? So
Hmm.
when you're doing market research, you're generally interested in all the people in the field who might be in, what an investor or a founder might call an addressable market. So
Hmm.
let's say you and I are selling um, hiking shoes, right? We're gonna sell a new brand of hiking boots. It's going to be Chip and Rand's Hikers. This is a terrible brand name. Don't anyone start this company.
Sounds
Um,
amazing. I'd buy it. Yeah.
well, you are named Chip, so right, you can
That
see the
helps.
appeal. It's one of
That
those.
helps.
Um,
Yeah.
so let's say we start this hiking boot company, and we want to know what is the addressable market, right? So who are the people who buy hiking boots? Where do they tend to buy them? Is it online? Is it in stores? Where do they learn about brands? All that kind of stuff. And how big is that market? How many people buy them? Men versus women, age range, demographics, all this kind of stuff. That information is great for kind of starting the company and your broad product strategy. Like, what should we make for whom? How are we going to tell the story to market it? Who is it specifically for? Like, maybe we're making hiking boots for folks who have a lot of uh, walking trouble, right? Like folks who are older, folks who have disabilities, folks who have, whatever. Problems with their heels, whatever their arches.
Sure.
So we're going to make this special type of hiking boot. Great, fantastic, right? That's a niche market, probably underserved, underinvested in. Very cool, but now we want to move from just market research to audience research, and that's essentially who are the people that are in our crowd, and what are their sources of influence and the people who influence them. So it could very likely be the case that there are many people who are uh, people and publications who influence our audience, right? It could be things like maybe it's the AARP magazine. Maybe it's they listen to NPR. Maybe they have podcasts or YouTube channels or follow certain social accounts in these spaces. Maybe it's they go to the websites of the national parks, right? And we're like, oh, okay, that all is our audience, even though I'm not trying to get park rangers at Mount Rainier or Sonoma Desert Park to buy our shoes, but they're still my audience. I want them to pay attention and be familiar with our brand and have heard of us, like us, trust us, and be able to recommend us. So audience is different than customers. And a ton of the problem in a lot of marketing spaces that I see is brands that exclusively market to their customers and ignore the fact that there's this whole layer of people and publications and sources of influence that affect the purchase decisions and even the awareness, and they pay no attention to them and they don't try and reach them. That's what audience research is all about, right? It's what does my audience pay attention to? Where do they learn about this product? And how could I go reach them? The most obvious one, Chip, the one I bet everyone who's listening is familiar with in that bucket, is keyword research, which is one kind of audience research, right? Like in search engine optimization and search engine marketing, you go and you look for what are all the keywords that are relevant to my business, and how many times they get searched for, where do they come from, what ranks for them, all that kind of stuff, right? That keyword research is just one slice. That's just a single channel. Now, what's the keyword research equivalent for Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube? Well, Twitter doesn't exist anymore, but websites, right? Podcasts, radio shows, sources of influence in the real world, right? Events and places people go, all that kind of stuff. So that's what the core of this difference is.
Okay. Very, very cool. So let's go back to the three ways we can do this in a cost-effective way. And so like we talked about surveys, but there's a piece that I think that people might be wondering about. Okay, I have a survey tool. I can do surveys. Great. Okay, who am I sending the survey to, or how am I distributing it?
You don't have to be extremely polished um, and perfect to get a lot of value from a survey, as long as you are collecting data from some of your ideal customers. So, my suggestion would be you want to target a broader than you need audience and then niche down. And your goal is to try and distribute this in places you know this audience pays attention. There's a few options there. Well, first off, if you are starting a company in a sector where you have very few or no connections, let me strongly encourage you to make some of those connections before you start that company, right? So, like, back up a step. I'm going to assume most of our listeners here, Chip, already have a company, already have an audience, already know how they can reach some of them. The best place I've seen to distribute surveys like this to learn more about your audience is your email list. If you already have 3,000 people, 30,000 people, 100,000 people who've subscribed to whatever your content, or you've captured their email at some point, that's the core person, right? Send it out to that list. The second option is your social media channels. The third, which should be quite relevant as well, right? If they're following you on social, or your business on social across whatever platform you're on, that probably means they care about what you do and would be likely to fill out a relatively simple survey, right? The third option there is sort of your network. So, gosh, I don't know anyone, or I don't have a connection to whatever the audience in the shoes world, but I actually, I know a few people who are in clothing and fashion and into outdoors and outdoor gear. I'm going to hit them up and be like, hey, could I sponsor your email newsletter? Could I do a co-promotion with you? Could we do a webinar together? Whatever it is, right? And then I'm going to use their audience to become mine. The last option, the one that I would really caution folks against, unless you just have tons of money, is you can pay survey firms to go find the people for you, right? And that's where it gets incredibly expensive. There are some cheaper options now, right? Like SurveyMonkey has an audience. SurveyMonkey changed their name. I
Do a
apologize.
panel, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but they have a panel, right, of
yeah,
people where they promote it to, or they use like gated content. So you want to read a story on the LA Times, hey, fill out this survey first, right? And the company has paid, the provider to sponsor that, and once they fill out the survey, then they can read the article on the LA Times. So there's stuff like that as well. It's made it somewhat more accessible and cheaper, but it can still be thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to collect enough responses. If you
yeah.
have the budget, go for it.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And I've actually leveraged the SurveyMonkey panel data and had great results with it. But
Yeah.
that's back when I had a bit of budget to work with. So not everybody's in that situation. So the next idea that we talked about, Rand, is really an idea that's hiding in plain sight, and it's just talking to people, doing interviews, right? And I think that a lot of people miss this step for some reason because it's right in front of you. But talk about, I've also heard them called IDIs, in-depth interviews. I don't know how often that acronym's used, but interviews, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that one's new to me. I will say this about interviews. I'm going to give a little bit of the opposite advice that I gave about surveys, which is I'm going to strongly suggest that while you should, usually from your surveys, right? So like you can pick out, 500 people answered this survey. These 300 were particularly relevant, and these 20 looked like archetypal members of our audience who are likely to be great customers for us. And 10 of them already are customers, but the other 20 are not yet customers. We're going to do interviews on those 30 people, right? We're going to invite them, ask them if they'd be willing to do a 30-minute call, hour call, whatever, with us. And my suggestion here would be that for most companies, unless you have a professional customer researcher, someone who's used to doing interviews and getting good information and that kind of stuff, that you hire a contractor. Every time we have done customer research, except for once, we hired somebody else to do it. I did one round myself. I shouldn't say one round. I did a lot in the very early days, right? Sort of informally. When I did one formal round. And Chip, you know what? People don't like telling you that your baby is ugly, right?
Right. Yeah.
So if you are looking for the truth, right, and tough feedback and like the real critical opinions, you're not going to get it if you work at the company, especially not if you're in leadership or you're the CEO or you're the founder or co-founder or something like that, right? And I'm co-founder and CEO, right? So when I call up people, I'm like, what do you think of SparkToro? Everybody says, oh my God, Rand, it's so good. I love it. I'm like, no. No, that's not.
Yeah.
What do
What do you really
then,
think? Yeah.
yeah, like, what do you think about this new feature idea? Oh my God, that's incredible. Is that your idea? Well, genius. I can imagine 1,000 ways I'm going to use it.
Yeah. So ideally hire somebody who's good at this and they're not you, right? And they know how to ask questions, and they're going to be much more disarming, right? For the people that they're asking questions to. So
Exactly. And people will
yeah.
people will give them their real feedback, real opinions. And you're trying to get two things here, right? You're trying to get like potentially feedback, customer research, right? This is feedback on your product and what you should do. But when we're talking about audience research, what you're really trying to understand is the problem space, right? So you would be asking questions like, oh, hey, you find it very uncomfortable to walk because you have, arch problems. And so you tend not to go hiking. And have you looked into orthopedic footwear before? And then you've got to wait, right? Like you have to wait. And what
Yeah.
brands
Bite
have
your
you
tongue and
considered?
wait. Exactly.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then you're asking questions like, how often do you currently do an activity like this? How often do your friends currently do an activity like this, or family? And if you were more capable, like, would you be invited? So you're asking questions. In this case, right, it can be somewhat pointed and personal. Um, in the case of a lot of B2B SaaS, it can be high pressure because it can feel salesy if it's done the wrong way, or it can not get to the core of the problem if you don't give that person time to explore. So, if you say, oh, how did you learn about the piece of software that you bought recently? They'll give you an answer and you can move on, or, okay, anything more you want to tell me about that?
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
that,
What a good tactic that's got to be. That's
oh
great.
my God,
Yeah.
outstanding, right? Because people
Yeah.
they really dig into oh, well, actually, it turns
You
out that
asked. Yeah. Since you asked. Yeah.
so you can get phenomenal information from this. And this, I think that this process to just needs to be very pointed. Like I would not, don't go to someone else's, whatever audience research template or customer research template. Make sure that if you do that, make sure that you're taking only questions and designing questions that are solving the problem you need to solve. Start
Sure.
with
Yeah.
your problem. If your problem is channels, ask about that. If it's tactics, dig into that. If it's messaging, go there. Whatever it is, you should be customizing those questions to get the right answers that deliver the value you need.
Yeah. So you have to understand what you want to get out of the survey, or what outcomes do I want to learn about? What problems and pain points am I really trying to understand from my customers? Right.
Absolutely.
So let's move on, Rand, because I know that there are some other low cost or inexpensive tools out there. SparkToro is one of them to do
Yeah.
audience research. So can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, and I always feel I'm from Seattle, so I'm very uncomfortable, promoting myself. And I know that sounds weird because we have Amazon and Microsoft here, but if you visit the Pacific Northwest, you'll notice
Well,
that
I've
people are,
used the tool a bit though. I mean, it's
yeah,
and Rand, it's
people are
great.
reserved.
Man.
Yeah. But so here's what I would say about tools like SparkToro. We're not the only ones. Brandwatch has a great audience research tool. There's a tool called Helixa.ai. There's another one called Audience, but with an S instead of a C. And this whole class of tools, like what they essentially do is they collect public data from the web, social data, um, clickstream data, right, from a panel, for example, and then they can tell you, like SparkToro. If you go to SparkToro, you could type in, my audience uses these words in their profile. It's one of the drop downs, orthodontist. And we could tell you, oh, well, orthodontists, we have 42,000 of those in our profile index, and they have these behaviors and they have these demographics, and you can find 12% of them subscribe to this YouTube channel. Whoa, 12% of orthodontists on the public social web. Granted, that's a subset of all orthodontists, because the ones that are in our database are ones who are active online, of course, and publicly active online. But still, that YouTube channel is probably a great place to go reach a lot of orthodontists. And there'll be 50, 100, 600 more YouTube channels that you could select, and you could conceivably take that and do several things, right? You could start watching videos from those YouTube channels to try and get a better sense of what are the topics being talked about? Why do orthodontists particularly like this one or this podcast, this social account? What is it that they do that is compelling? Could I bring that to my content strategy or my media strategy, my PR strategy or whatever? And then the other thing that's valuable is you could just try and be present in those places. Hey, I'm going to pitch to be a guest on that YouTube channel, or I'm going to throw that YouTube channel into my Google Ads account and I'm going to run ads in front of that YouTube channel. It's probably going to be more effective than the advertising targeting that Google gives me. And that type of audience research is both strategic and tactical, right? Because you can get the big picture sense of, okay, here's the audience, here's where they're present, here's some data about them. And also, if I want to reach them, here are messages and content that's resonating, and here are channels and sources that they're paying attention to.
Yeah. So you find out where they are, but also what kind of content they're responding to now and engaging with, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think this is kind of the core of a marketer's job, right? Is to know what message in which places will resonate with our audience, and then how do we achieve that? How do we tell that message in those places at the right time?
Yeah, right message to the right person at the right time in the right place. So often the challenge. Well, Rand, this has been a phenomenal discussion. That's all we have time for, but thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure, Chip. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I would love to have you back sometime, and we'll find another topic to talk about. So appreciate it very much. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this episode of Closing Time. Make sure you subscribe, tick the bell, and we'll see you next time.